In the first part of this series, After Exile, Before Messiah, we went over the events of history that led to the full exile of the Yahudim before they returned back to the land. We saw a people that went far from Yah and desired to live according to their own will in their own way by their own power. As we prepare for Yah's kingdom and the tribulation that comes before it, it is important that we draw understanding from these things so that we do not repeat the mistakes that drove people away from Yahuah. They say they wanted to follow him, but they desired more to follow themselves and follow what made them feel more secure. In Lesson 1, we saw that we should listen to the prophets and listen to Yah when he guides us. And so if that understanding of listening to the prophets was truly learned, this next lesson must now be applied. In this lesson, we need to be reminded of the importance of remembering and focusing on his promises. I recently made a video giving my testimony about how I felt when I was rejected by my family and my friends. That rejection truly hurt me. But in the grand scheme of things, I am no one important. And as I read the comments, I just saw how many of us who have chosen Yah are dealing with the same things. It was comforting to hear. But here's the thing. We are talking about us. But how much do we actually consider what Yah has had to put up with? When I read the word and look at the history of Yasharel, my heart severely weeps for Yah. Yah chose this people, Yasharel, took them out of bondage, gave them a land that was promised to them. Through his power, not theirs, he drove out the inhabitants that were already in that land. He established them and set them up with kings like David, and gave this small nation fame amongst the known world. But even with all he did for them and what he showed them, they still rejected him and played the harlot. If you can't read these books and recognize how wrong Yasharel was and how wicked and ungrateful and idolatrous they were, then you have a heart issue. This history makes you want to repent not only for our sins today, but of the sins of Yasharel in the past, and declare to Yah that you will be his and you will do better. Through all the wickedness Yasharel did, he still had a plan for them, and hallelujah, he still does. Today, the devil wants us to forget about this, and he wants us to forget about how powerful Yah's promises are. And he has done this through many different ways, like distracting us. But specifically has done this by replacing the people of the covenant and making the world feel that Yah's promises have already been fulfilled. The reason why so many people, particularly Christians, do not understand the end times is because they have either ignored the promises or they probably don't know them, even though some of them have been going to church for over 50 to 60 years. And again, they probably don't know about them because they believe lies and they falsely believe that some of these promises have already been fulfilled. So there's no reason to learn about them again. Either way, no matter what the reason is, most people ignore Yah and his love for his children because they don't focus on his promises. As we are about to enter the times of tribulation, we are blessed because we don't have to learn about what Yah plans for us in real time as Yasharel did. We have access to his word and we have access to his spirit. We can now know what he desires for us and what he plans for all of us. And as we prepare for his kingdom, we can use the knowledge and understanding of his promises to prepare us for the times ahead. If we understand the promises and focus on them, it can help our faith and help our problem with trust, because we know that there is a plan and an end goal. So what we are going to do is go back to the times of the exile of the Yahudim and understand what happened during their captivity. We will see that Yahuah still was not done with them. And through the prophets Jeremiah and Ezekiel, among others, he prophesied and foretold of his promises to come. Some were fulfilled during that time later on, and others we are waiting for today. Hallelujah. After we know this history, we will clearly learn the lesson to never forget and that we should always focus on Yah's promises. Let's begin. Okay, so when we left off in the first part, the exiles were carried off by Nebuchadnezzar to Babylon. They now were dwelling in the land of Babylon, and they began to establish themselves there. Many people know of the book of Daniel and the events that happened with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego when they were being cast in the fiery furnace, and also with Daniel being put in the lion's den. For the majority, Christians, they know these stories, but that's just what they are, stories, things they were told in their Sunday morning Bible school. But understanding the details of why they were even there and what they were doing is pretty much lost to the majority. The book of Daniel does go into some of the history of the Yahudim in Babylon, but other than the book of Daniel, life in Babylon is not well documented in the scriptures. But the empire of Babylon itself is well known in our history. Solomon Grazel's book gives some more detail about the Yahudim's life in Babylon. In his book, he explained, the Babylonians were cruel conquerors. They executed the leaders of the people that they conquered. They sometimes kept men in prison for many long years. But they were not cruel masters, and we see that clearly in the book of Daniel. The majority of the people whom they drove into exile were permitted to live and work under certain conditions. Now, they definitely were not able to return back to their own land, and they were looked down upon in society as a conquered people. Mind you, this sounds very similar to the same experience the slaves had here in Mystery Babylon. But let me continue. The conquered people that were now in Babylon were sometimes assigned land, which they could work until if they paid heavy taxes. Sometimes they were permitted to settle in cities and earn their living from trade or their own manual labor. The exiles over time adjusted themselves to the new conditions. Babylon was the current world empire who had control over most of the known world. And being a prosperous country, those who adapted could find some sort of prosperity. So for the Yahudim who once lived under the promises of greatness, there was now a change for them. Each of the exiles could have a personal future in Babylonia, but as a whole, the future of the Yahudim seemed to be without hope. For instance, Daniel held stature in Babylon and was able to establish himself there. But this meant very little in regards to the future of his people as a whole. His stature in the land did not elevate his people in the land. That's what I'm trying to say. The kingdom of Babylonia was definitely different in contrast to Judea, the land where the Yahudim came from. And the city of Babylon itself was definitely different from Jerusalem. Babylon was huge, big huge walls, towering domes of its temples, massive palaces. Jerusalem could be compared as a small town compared to Babylon. As the exiles now lived in this land, they were now seeing right in front of them people performing sacrifices in Babylon's temple to Marduk or Ishtar, the chief gods of Babylon. In the city were mistresses from all over the known world, men from every nation. Many different people all in one nation could be seen. A melting pot, if you will. Again, not different than Mystery Babylon, which controls this world today. But in this empire is where the exiles of the Yahudim walked and were influenced by. As time of the exile went on, their personal life became easier, but they began to believe that there was no use of struggling against anything as powerful as Babylon because Yah had forgotten them. They began to become assimilated into Babylon. You see, the way of Babylon was all about bringing people into their way. They changed their names. They changed how they ate, how they worshipped. We see many examples of this in Daniel. For instance, in Babylon, Daniel's name wasn't the Hebrew name Daniel. It was Belteshazzar, and that's how it's shown in the King James Version, just like that. But that doesn't help you really understand what they were really doing with that name. The name was actually Baal Tezashar, and that name was used because they incorporate the name of their gods in their names. And the name of their god at the time of Babylon was Baal. This is very much what they do in language. It's why Yah is incorporated in many of the Hebrew names. Jeremiah or Yirmiyahu, Isaiah or Yeshayahu, Zechariah or Zachariah, Matthew or Mattheyahu. Yah is incorporated in their names for respect, admiration, and honor. Their names have meanings. So a name like Zechariah or Zachariah actually means Yahuah remembers. He is incorporated in their lives. But this was not just something that the Hebrews did, but Babylon honored their god Baal in their names, which is why we see these different names like Nebuchadnezzar's son, Baalshazar. This influence is quite common. The Greeks also incorporated this. Their god Zeus was incorporated in many of their names. Dionysus, Bacchus, Icarus, Olympus, Prometheus, Cyprus, Uranus, which is why I do not use the Greek transliteration of our Messiah's name, Jesus. I just want to point out this practice. In regards to Babylon, they were assimilating those they conquered into Babylonia. This was the way of Babylon as we clearly see in Daniel. Verses 3 and 4 of chapter 1 of Daniel says, Then the king instructed Ashpenaz, the master of his eunuchs, to bring some of the children of Yasharel and some of the king's descendants and some of the nobles, young men in whom there was no blemish, but good-looking, gifted in all wisdom, possessing knowledge and quick to understand, who had ability to serve in the king's palace, and whom they might teach the language and literature of the Chaldeans. The Yahudim were assimilated into Babylon, and while they were learning about their new life in exile, they had no hope about being who they were before. So this is again where the prophets came into the picture. Prophets like Ezekiel and Jeremiah went from being prophets of just doom to prophets of hope as they prophesied what Yah placed upon them. Ezekiel had a difficult job of proclaiming Yah's message on the crowded and hostile streets of Babylon, while Jeremiah was warning the citizens of Jerusalem before they were eventually conquered, as we saw in part 1. Ezekiel was preaching the same message in Babylon to the exiles. Yah used Ezekiel to warn, exhort, and comfort these exiles. You see, the exiles were in despair. They thought this was the end to them and their covenant with Yah. Psalm 137 is notable as it captures the feelings of the exiles as they reached Babylon. By the rivers of Babylon, there we sat down. Yeah, we wept when we remembered Zion. We hung our harps upon the willows in the midst of it. For there those who carried us away captive asked of us a song, and those who plundered us requested mirth, saying, Sing us one of the songs of Zion. How shall we sing Yahuah's song in a foreign land? Psalm chapter 137, verses 1 through 4. They were in despair. You see, because we know the story of what happens later, we can oftentimes look at all of this from a different perspective than they actually had to. You see, this situation was not easy for them. These people were just taken from their homes, separated from family and friends, and conquered. They didn't look at it as some jail time and then they go home. They thought they had completely lost their home. Their temple was destroyed. But it is at this time of despair when Yah chose Ezekiel and grants him a vision and calls him to be a watchman for his people. It says, Now it came to pass in the 30th year, in the 4th month, on the 5th day of the month, as I was among the captives by the river Chebar, that the heavens were opened, and I saw visions of Elohim. On the 5th day of the month, which was in the 5th year of King Jehoiachin's captivity, the word of Yahuah came expressly to Ezekiel the priest, the son of Buzi, in the land of the Chaldeans by the river Chebar, and the hand of Yahuah was upon him there. That's Ezekiel chapter 1, verses 1 through 3. You see, Ezekiel is literally standing next to the waters of Babylon when instead of seeing the feet, he saw Yah. Let's keep reading. And above the firmament, over their heads was like the likeness of a throne, in appearance like a sapphire stone. On the likeness of the throne was a likeness with the appearance of a man high above it. Also from the appearance of his waist and upward, I saw, as it were, the color of amber with the appearance of fire all around it. And from the appearance of his waist and downward, I saw, as it were, the appearance of fire with brightness all around it. Like the appearance of a rainbow in a cloud on a rainy day, so was the appearance of the brightness all around it. This was the appearance of the likeness of the glory of Yahuah. So when I saw it, I fell on my face and heard a voice of one speaking. That's Ezekiel chapter 1, verses 26 through 28. Let's keep going. And he said to me, Son of man, stand on your feet, and I will speak to you. Then the Spirit entered me when he spoke to me, and set me on my feet, and I heard him who spoke to me. And he said to me, Son of man, I am sending you to the children of Israel, to a rebellious nation that has rebelled against me. They and their fathers have transgressed against me to this very day, for they are impudent and stubborn children. I am sending you to them, and you shall say to them, Thus says Yahuah Elohim. As for them, whether they hear or whether they refuse, for they are a rebellious house, yet they will know that a prophet has been among them. And you, son of man, do not be afraid of them, nor be afraid of their words. Though briars and thorns are with you, and you dwell among scorpions, do not be afraid of their words, or be dismayed by their looks, though they are a rebellious house. You shall speak my words to them, whether they hear or whether they refuse, for they are rebellious. But you, son of man, hear what I say to you. Do not be rebellious like that rebellious house. Open your mouth and eat what I give you. Ezekiel chapter 2, verses 1 through 8. And this is how the start of the book of the prophet Ezekiel begins. You see, Yahuah still loved and chose this rebellious nation. You see, he spoke of them continuously as being rebellious children. But through all that, he still had a plan for them. And the book of Ezekiel and Jeremiah specifically shows us this. They were in exile and in despair. But Yah chose prophets to warn them, yes, but he also chose them to give them hope. I think it's first important to understand Yah's anger with his people. So let's deal with that. As we read Ezekiel, we hear the anger of Yah because his people broke his covenant. They rejected him. The word says, "And it came to pass in the 6th year, in the 6th month, on the 5th day of the month, as I sat in my house with the elders of Judah sitting before me, that the hand of Yahuah Elohim fell upon me there. Then I looked, and there was a likeness, like the appearance of fire, from the appearance of his waist and downward, fire, and from his waist and upward, like the appearance of brightness, like the color of amber. He stretched out the form of a hand, and took me by a lock of my hair. And the Spirit lifted me up between earth and heaven, and brought me in visions of Elohim to Jerusalem, to the door of the north gate of the inner court, where the seat of the image of jealousy was, which provokes to jealousy. And behold, the glory of the Elohim of Israel was there, like the vision that I saw on the plain. Then he said to me, Son of man, lift your eyes now toward the north. So I lifted my eye toward the north, and there, north of the altar gate, was this image of jealousy in the entrance. Furthermore, he said to me, Son of man, do you see what they are doing? The great abominations that the house of Israel commits here, to make me go far away from my sanctuary? Now turn again, you will see greater abominations. So he brought me to the door of the court, and when I looked, there was a hole in the wall. Then he said to me, Son of man, dig into the wall. And when I dug into the wall, there was a door, and he said to me, Go in and see the wicked abominations which they are doing there. So I went in and saw, and there, every sort of creeping thing, abominable beast, and all the idols of the house of Israel, portrayed all around on the walls. And there stood before them 70 men of the elders of the house of Israel, and in their midst stood Jazaniah the son of Shaphan. Each man had a censer in his hand, and a thick cloud of incense went up. Then he said to me, Son of man, have you seen what the elders of the house of Israel do in the dark? Every man in the room of his idols. For they say, Yahuah does not see us. Yahuah has forsaken the land. And he said to me, Turn again, and you will see greater abominations that they're doing. So he brought me to the door of the north gate of Yahuah's house, and to my dismay, women were sitting there weeping for Tammuz. Then he said to me, Have you seen this, O son of man? Turn again, you will see greater abominations than these. So he brought me into the inner court of Yahuah's house, and there, at the door of the temple of Yahuah, between the porch and the altar, were about 25 men with their backs toward the temple of Yahuah and their faces toward the east. And they were worshiping the sun toward the east. And he said to me, Have you seen this, O son of man? Is it a trivial thing to the house of Judah to commit the abominations which they commit here? For they have filled the land with violence. Then they have returned to provoke me to anger. Indeed, they put the branch to their nose. Therefore, I also will act in fury. My eye will not spare, nor will I have pity. And though they cry in my ears with a loud voice, I will not hear them. That's Ezekiel chapter 8, verses 1 through 18. Wow. Look at what happened there. Yah took Ezekiel by his locks. Please note, these are not locks. These are. But I don't want to lose focus. Ezekiel is sitting in his new house in Babylon in the company of the exile leaders of Judah when he's offered a vision. This is when Yah takes him by the locks. Ezekiel is given a vision of the temple, and then he is taken on a tour of the temple in the days before it had been destroyed. Yah has given him a little glimpse of the past. He peeks through a hole in the wall and sees Yahuah's people being unfaithful within the temple itself. You see, Yah sees everything, and he gave Ezekiel this vision showing why his people were cast out and they were exiled. I highlighted this just so you can see how angry Yah was. He asked, Is this a trivial thing for them to do this? Of course it wasn't, and that's why they were taken down. In many of these scriptures in Ezekiel, he speaks about his anger with Yasharel playing the harlot. And this helps understand what happened to them. But I also want you to see that Yahuah sees everything. He was showing Ezekiel visions of what Yahshua was doing in his temple. He was watching them. He watches us. So it is important that as you live out your days, you do not do so in ignorance, believing that Yah is not watching. He sees everything. So keep yourself pure and undefiled. So let's continue. Through Ezekiel, Yahuah prophesied to the Yahudim of exactly why they were in the predicament that they were in. Yahuah was not playing with them. Now some of the elders of Israel came to me and sat before me. And the word of Yahuah came to me, saying, Son of man, these men have set up their idols in their hearts, and put before them that which causes them to stumble into iniquity. Should I let myself be inquired of at all by them? Therefore speak to them and say to them, Thus says Yahuah Elohim, every one of the house of Israel who sets up his idols in his heart, and puts before him what causes him to stumble into iniquity, and then comes to the prophet, I, Yahuah, will answer him who comes, according to the multitude of his idols, that I may seize the house of Israel by their heart, because they are all estranged from me by their idols. Ezekiel chapter 14, verses 1 through 5. And so as we read this book, we see the anger of Yah. He is chastising his children, just as we would do our children who are disobedient. But though there is anger, there is also hope. Though Yah was angry, he was not done with Yasharel. We know, according to Daniel, that because of the scribes, they remember the 70-year prophecy of Jeremiah. It says in Daniel chapter 9, In the first year of Darius, the son of Ahasuerus, of the lineage of the Medes, who was made king over the realm of the Chaldeans, in the first year of his reign, I, Daniel, understood by the books the number of the years specified by the word of Yahuah through Jeremiah the prophet, that he would accomplish 70 years in the desolations of Jerusalem. Then I set my face toward Yahuah Elohim to make requests by prayer and supplications, with fasting, sackcloth, and ashes. And I prayed to Yahuah my Elohim, and made confession, and said, O Yahuah, great and awesome El, who keeps his covenant and mercy with those who love him, and with those who keep his commandments. We have sinned and committed iniquity. We have done wickedly and rebelled, even by departing from your precepts and your judgments. Neither have we heeded your servants the prophets, who spoke in your name to our kings and our princes, to our fathers, and all the people of the land. O Yahuah, righteousness belongs to you, but to us shame of face, as it is this day. To the men of Judah, to the inhabitants of Jerusalem and all Israel, those near and those far off in all the countries to which you have driven them, because of the unfaithfulness which they have committed against you. That's Daniel chapter 9, verses 1 through 7. Daniel was praying that it was time for his people to go home. Now, to understand this deeper, the prophecy of Jeremiah that he referred to said, Therefore thus says Yahuah of hosts, because you have not heard my words, behold, I will send and take all the families of the north, says Yahuah, and Nebuchadnezzar the king of Babylon, my servant, and will bring them against this land, against its inhabitants, and against these nations all around, and will utterly destroy them, and make them an astonishment, a hissing, and perpetual desolations. Moreover, I will take from them the voice of mirth, and the voice of gladness, the voice of the bridegroom, and the voice of the bride, the sound of the millstones, and the light of the lamp. And this whole land shall be a desolation and an astonishment, and these nations shall serve the king of Babylon 70 years. Then it will come to pass, when 70 years are completed, that I will punish the king of Babylon and that nation, the land of the Chaldeans, for their iniquity, says Yahuah. And I will make it a perpetual desolation. So I will bring on that land all my words which I have pronounced against it, all that is written in this book, which Jeremiah has prophesied concerning all the nations. That's Jeremiah chapter 25, verses 8 through 13. And so the people eventually started holding on to the hope that Jeremiah had prophesied of. It wasn't only Jeremiah, because even before Jeremiah, Isaiah during his time prophesied of Judah being restored by Cyrus. Thus says Yahuah, your Redeemer, and he who formed you from the womb. I am Yahuah, who makes all things, who stretches out the heavens all alone, who spreads abroad the earth by myself, who frustrates the signs of the babblers, and drives diviners mad, who turns wise men backward, and make their knowledge foolishness, who confirms the word of his servant, and performs the counsel of his messengers, who says to Jerusalem, you shall be inhabited. To the cities of Judah, you shall be built, and I will raise up her waste places. Who says to the deep, be dry, and I will dry up your rivers. Who says of Cyrus, he is my shepherd, and he shall perform all my pleasure. Saying to Jerusalem, you shall be built, and to the temple your foundation shall be laid. Isaiah chapter 44, verses 24 through 28. So these things were prophesied of. But as you read these prophecies, it's important that you understand some differences, because Yah did not only prophesy of them going back, but he prophesied of a time of them coming back to being blessed and restored fully, Israel and Judah. And this is the time where we start seeing the promise of restoration of Yasharel. The prophets began to receive word from Yahuah that Yah did not completely abandon them, but in time he will restore them. And the wonderful thing is that when we read these prophecies, though it was given during their time in exile, we see that he is prophesying to us today. And we know this with a surety for a couple of reasons. First thing we know is that not everything he has prophesied has happened yet, not even remotely close. And two, and this is the biggest, we also know this because Yahusha himself, our Messiah, had more to add to this prophecy when he spoke of the time of the Gentiles. Yahusha says in Luke chapter 21, but when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, then know that its desolation is near. Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Let those who are in the midst of her depart, and let not those who are in the country enter her. For these are the days of vengeance, that all things which are written may be fulfilled. But woe to those who are pregnant and to those who are nursing babies in those days. For there will be great distress in the land and wrath upon this people. And they will fall by the edge of the sword, and be led away captive into all nations. And Jerusalem will be trampled by Gentiles until the times of the Gentiles are fulfilled. That's Luke chapter 21, verses 20 through 24. So Yahusha had said and prophesied that Judah would fall by the edge of the sword and be led away captive into all nations. This is the time of Jacob's trouble, as prophesied by Jeremiah, like Yahusha said, that all things which are written may be fulfilled. For thus says Yahuah, we have heard a voice of trembling, of fear and not of peace. Ask now and see, whether a man is ever in labor with child. So why do I see every man with his hands on his loins like a woman in labor, and all faces turn pale? Alas, for that day is great, so that none is like it, and it is the time of Jacob's trouble. But he shall be saved out of it. For it shall come to pass in that day, says Yahuah of hosts, that I will break his yoke from your neck, and will burst your bonds. Foreigners shall no more enslave them, but they shall serve Yahuah their Elohim, and David their king, whom I will raise up for them. Therefore, do not fear, O my servant Jacob, says Yahuah, nor be dismayed, O Israel. For behold, I will save you from afar, and your seed from the land of their captivity. Jacob shall return, have rest and be quiet, and no one shall make him afraid. For I am with you, says Yahuah, to save you. Though I make full end of all nations where I have scattered you, yet I will not make a complete end of you, but I will correct you in justice and will not let you go altogether unpunished. That's Jeremiah chapter 30, verses 5 through 11. And so it needs to be made very clear about his promises for us, because the world is completely ignorant and unaware of them. And if you live in ignorance of his word and do not study to show yourself approved, you could be misled and lack understanding. The restoration of Yasharel is my hope and what I am longing for and waiting for. And so as we live in this land of Babylon, we are waiting for Yahuah to extend his hand and bring us home. I'm not waiting to disappear. That's not his promise. He promises to restore us. I'm not looking for civil rights and looking for our politicians to make us equal. That's a trick of Satan. None of this has anything to do with Yah. Yah promises to restore us. And so let's go back to Ezekiel and understand this. These are his promises. As I live, says Yahuah Elohim, surely with a mighty hand, with an outstretched arm, and with fury poured out, I will rule over you. I will bring you out from the peoples and gather you out of the countries where you are scattered, with a mighty hand, with an outstretched arm, and with fury poured out. And I will bring you into the wilderness of the peoples, and there I will plead my case with you face to face. Just as I pleaded my case with your fathers in the wilderness of the land of Egypt, so I will plead my case with you, says Yahuah Elohim. I will make you pass under the rod, and I will bring you into the bond of the covenant. I will purge the rebels from among you, and those who transgress against me, I will bring them out of the country where they dwell, but they shall not enter the land of Israel. Then you will know that I am Yahuah. That's Ezekiel chapter 20, verses 33 through 38. These are end-time scriptures, end-time prophecies. Please listen to what Yahuah has said. And you, son of man, prophesy to the mountains of Israel, and say, O mountains of Israel, hear the word of Yahuah. Thus says Yahuah Elohim, because the enemy has said of you, Aha, the ancient heights have become our possession. Therefore prophesy and say, Thus says Yahuah Elohim, because they made you desolate and swallowed you up on every side, so that you became the possession of the rest of the nations, and you were taken up by the lips of talkers and slandered by the people. Therefore, O mountains of Israel, hear the word of Yahuah Elohim. Thus says Yahuah Elohim to the mountains, the hills, the rivers, the valleys, the desolate waste, and the cities that have been forsaken, which become plunder and mockery to the rest of the nations all around. Therefore, thus says Yahuah Elohim, surely I have spoken in my burning jealousy against the rest of the nations and against all Edom, who gave my land to themselves as a possession with wholehearted joy and spiteful minds in order to plunder its open country. That's Ezekiel chapter 36, verses 1 through 5. Whoa. He burns against the rest of the nations and against Edom. And what did he say that Edom did? Edom, who gave his land for themselves as a possession? Please focus on his words in his prophecy. This is why we study to show ourselves approved, because if you know the biblical history of Edom, you'll know that this never happened yet in the Bible. And as we go through the history of this exile before Messiah, you will know more about that history, Yah willing. But this did not happen yet in the time of the scriptures. It's happening now. Everything we see in this world today is spiritual, and you cannot ignore that. Now, please read the full chapter of Ezekiel 36 on your own, but for time's sake, I'm going to skip to the next chapter. Now, before I do, let me just say this. So many people who sometimes watch these videos accuse me of speaking through race, because they see a lot of this being about skin color. But as I continually try to make this clear and known, this is not about the color of anyone's skin. This is about a people who have been scattered, who have been plundered, who have been mocked, and became the possession of the rest of the nations. This is as the scriptures say. And just because they have a skin color does not mean that the content that I'm speaking about is about race or skin color. It's not about that. It's about a certain people. And there will be a time, according to Yah, when all these problems that came to them, the troubles of them, will be no more. And so if we're focusing on his promises, as Yah wakes us up, we must serve him in truth. And that is what you have been seeing in these videos. The devil has sadly made this being looked through the eyes of race. But if you can understand what Yah is really doing, you can understand that this is not about the color of anyone's skin, but about people that were cursed and that went through the time of trouble and that had things that were prophesied against them. And we are now at a time where all of this is about to be over and Yah is about to fulfill his promises. And so if you want to be a part of it, you must see things through the proper lens. You must see things through actual biblical eyes, through actual prophecy, through actually understanding the spiritual aspect of what is going on in this world. I'm going to continue speaking about his promises. This next promise is extremely important, and it's one that is pretty much forgotten. I spoke about this in the Understanding Israel series, part 5, but I want to highlight this again because I just think that this is not clearly understood for many. Ezekiel chapter 37 says, "The hand of Yahuah came upon me and brought me out in the spirit of Yahuah. It set me down in the midst of the valley, and it was full of bones. Then he caused me to pass by them all around, and behold, there were very many in the open valley, and indeed they were very dry. And he said to me, Son of man, can these bones live? So I answered, O Adonai Yahuah, you know. Again he said to me, Prophesy to these bones and say to them, O dry bones, hear the word of Yahuah. Thus says Adonai Yahuah to these bones, surely I will cause breath to enter into you, and you shall live. I will put sinews on you, and bring flesh upon you, cover you with skin, and put breath in you, and you shall live. Then you shall know that I am Yahuah. So I prophesied as I was commanded, and as I prophesied, there was a noise, and suddenly a rattling. And the bones came together, bone to bone. Indeed, as I looked, the sinews and flesh came upon them, and the skin covered them over, but there was no breath in them. Also he said to me, prophesy to the breath. Prophesy, son of man, and say to the breath, thus says Adonai Yahuah, come from the four winds, O breath, and breathe on these slain, that they may live. So I prophesied as he commanded me, and breath came into them, and they lived, and stood upon their feet, an exceedingly great army. Then he said to me, son of man, these bones are the whole house of Israel. They indeed say, our bones are dry, our hope is lost, and we ourselves are cut off. Therefore prophesy and say to them, thus says Adonai Yahuah, behold, O my people, I will open your graves and cause you to come up from your graves and bring you into the land of Israel. Then you shall know that I am Yahuah. When I have opened your graves, O my people, and brought you up from your graves, I will put my spirit in you, and you shall live, and I will place you in your own land. Then you shall know that I, Yahuah, have spoken it and performed it, says Yahuah. That's Ezekiel chapter 37, verses 1 through 14. This chapter starts with Ezekiel recalling a past experience he had with Yah. When we see the reference to these bones, this is in reference to death. As Yahuah says, the bones symbolize the whole house of Israel. So as we read, Ezekiel describes them, 1, that they are dry or spiritually dead, 2, that they are hopeless with no apparent hope of being resurrected as the people of Yah, and 3, they are dispersed and disassembled before they were rejoined and rebuilt. What is happening here is Yah's chosen people through Yah's spirit are being given a spiritual rebirth. The spiritual rebirth of Israel would miraculously revive and restore his people to what Yah had intended them to be in the beginning. This was a vision depicting Yah's power and promise to restore and revive a dead people. And just as I keep saying, there are many that are saying that because of the current occupants of the land, this prophecy has been fulfilled. But this is not true. Now, I have made a specific video explaining who these people are, and it's on my website if you want to really understand this further. But you don't even need to know all of that history to understand why this is not true. We know this for sure because currently the occupants of the land are referenced as Jews. But Jews are just one tribe of the 12 tribes. This prophecy is all about the whole house of Israel being restored, as verse 11 says. We have to apply it in full. The Israelites dispersed throughout the world will begin to awaken to their heritage. The bones represent that the nation of Israel is dead, but they are brought back to life. Israel and Judah will begin to remember who they are among their captivity. Notice also that Ezekiel heard a rattling first, and this is what is happening right now. Some of Israel and Judah are already beginning to awaken. Yahuah will remember his people and bring them out of their captivity. Though Israel was dead as a nation of peoples among the world, Yahuah will have mercy on them and awaken them and bring them back home. Hallelujah. These are his promises. In the other video, someone in the comments asked, where in the Holy Scriptures does it say that the Israelites would totally lose their identity as Israelites in their exile? So maybe you have that question as well, you just never asked it. Let's cover this because it's in Jeremiah. The sin of Judah is written with a pen of iron. With the point of a diamond, it is engraved on the tablet of their heart and on the horns of your altars. While their children remember their altars and their wooden images by the green trees on the high hills. O my mountain in the field, I will give as a plunder your wealth, all your treasures, and your high places of sin within all your borders. And you, even yourself, shall let go of your heritage which I gave you. And I will cause you to serve your enemies in the land which you do not know, for you have kindled a fire in my anger, which shall burn forever. That's Jeremiah chapter 17, verses 1 through 4. He gave Judah away. He gave them as a plunder. and they let go of their heritage which he gave them, and he caused them to serve their enemies in a land which they do not know. But hallelujah, according to his promises, he plans to restore them. Then say to them, thus says Adonai Yahuah, surely I will take the children of Israel from among the nations, wherever they have gone, and will gather them from every side and bring them into their own land. And I will make them one nation in the land, on the mountains of Israel, and one king shall be over them all. And they shall no longer be two nations, nor shall they ever be divided into two kingdoms again. They shall not defile themselves any more with their idols, nor with their detestable things, nor with any of their transgressions. But I will deliver them from all their dwelling places in which they have sinned, and will cleanse them. Then they shall be my people, and I will be their Elohim. David my servant shall be king over them, and they shall all have one shepherd. They shall also walk in my judgments and observe my statutes and do them. Then they shall dwell in the land that I have given to Jacob my servant, where your fathers dwelt, and they shall dwell there, they, their children, and their children's children forever. And my servant David shall be their prince forever. Moreover, I will make a covenant of peace with them, and there shall be an everlasting covenant with them. I will establish them and multiply them, and I will set my sanctuary in their midst forevermore. My tabernacle also shall be with them. Indeed, I will be their Elohim, and they shall be my people. The nations also will know that I, Yahuah, sanctify Israel, when my sanctuary is in their midst forevermore. That's Ezekiel chapter 37, verses 21 through 28. He said he will gather them from every side and bring them into their own land and make them one nation, and they no longer will be two nations or a divided kingdom. Yahusha will rule the house of Israel, and they will obey him. They will dwell in the land Yah promised to Jacob, and they will follow their king, Yahusha. They will never be uprooted again. Israel will be restored to him, and it will be through Yahusha, their king. Hallelujah. These are promises. And so since they were in exile and they sinned against Yahuah, they were chastised. But yes, they were made promises too. And for those of us who truly love Yah and live according to his word and his will, we are waiting on his promise and resting and trusting on them. My life is completely staked to his promises and his word, and I am not moving according to my own power, but his. There have been many throughout the time of the scriptures who have been waiting for Yah to fulfill his promises and restore Yasharel. I mean, as I point out in other videos, even during the time of the disciples, they were still expecting Yahusha to do this during that time. Therefore, when they had come together, they asked him, saying, Adonai, will you at this time restore the kingdom to Yasharel? That's Acts chapter 1, verse 6. They were waiting for this because it had not happened yet. So the nerve of us to feel that these scriptures have already been fulfilled. There was still more that Yah had to do. You see, the problem with religion and the problem with the modern day church is they claim a love for Yah and his promises while ignoring his word and his promises. Completely hypocritical. They are committing the same exact sins that he chastised his people for during the time of exile that they were in. They think that these promises are all fulfilled because that's what the mainstream has told them. But this is just a lie that separates the wheat from the tares. Though Yah has promised to restore Yasharel, he sent Yahusha before and sacrificed his own son so that all who believed can be born again and be grafted into Yasharel, whether they are natural or a wild branch. It is not a time to think about skin color or race. It is a time to anticipate and wait on his promises. But those of the wild branches, you cannot boast against the natural branches and be against them, and not have empathy for them. You must understand all that Yah has prophesied against them and understand what has actually been going on. In these times before tribulation, it is imperative that we look past skin color and race, this mindset that the enemy has put in front of us. He put it there so that we all ignorantly identify a group of people as black people. That's how we know them as. The world does this while they all go to church and claim a love for the God of the Bible, who very clearly told us all that he would do to his children if they disobeyed, and they clearly did. They are scattered all over this world. But Yahuah has promised to bring us all back to him, and whether you are a natural branch or wild, you should have a bag packed and be waiting for him to fulfill his promises. We cannot ignore his promises and his prophecy, and it is this period of history in the Bible that has the most to do with our future. But ironically, it is the least widely known because we do not read and study to show ourselves approved. If you are holding on to mainstream religion, it will not save you. You are claiming belief and love of a God that you do not know, nor do you understand. And you will be following the false God that you claim to be an enemy of. You will be following him straight to hell, away from Yah. You must get out of that mainstream religion. Those who are friend of this world are enemies of Yahuah. In regards to Bible prophecy, so many focus on the evil. They focus on the mark of the beast and the tribulation of the saints. But if you want to be ready, you need to focus on his promises. Read about them and pray about them. Teach others and help others. I'm going to end it with this letter that Jeremiah sent to the captives at Babylon in Jeremiah chapter 29. It says, "Now these are the words of the letter that Jeremiah the prophet sent from Jerusalem to the remainder of the elders who were carried away captive, to the priests, the prophets, and all the people whom Nebuchadnezzar had carried away captive from Jerusalem to Babylon. This happened after Jeconiah the king, the queen mother, the eunuchs, the princes of Judah and Jerusalem, the craftsmen, and the smiths had departed from Jerusalem. The letter was sent by the hand of Elisah, the son of Shaphan, and Gemariah, the son of Hilkiah, whom Zedekiah king of Judah sent to Babylon, to Nebuchadnezzar king of Babylon, saying, Thus says Yahuah of hosts, the Elohim of Israel, to all who were carried away captive, whom I have caused to be carried away from Jerusalem to Babylon. Build houses and dwell in them. Plant gardens and eat their fruit. Take wives and beget sons and daughters. Take wives for your sons and give your daughters to husbands, so that they may bear sons and daughters, that you may be increased there and not diminished. And seek the peace of the city where I have caused you to be carried away captive, and pray to Yahuah for it. For in its peace you will have peace. For thus says Yahuah of hosts, the Elohim of Israel, do not let your prophets and your diviners who are in your midst deceive you, nor listen to your dreams which you cause to be dreamed. For they prophesy falsely to you in my name. I have not sent them, says Yahuah. For thus says Yahuah, after 70 years are completed at Babylon, I will visit you and perform my good word toward you, and cause you to return to this place. For I know the thoughts that I think toward you, says Yahuah, thoughts of peace and not of evil, to give you a future and a hope. Then you will call upon me and go and pray to me, and I will listen to you. And you will seek me and find me, when you search for me with all your heart. I will be found by you, says Yahuah, and I will bring you back from your captivity. I will gather you from all the nations and from all the places where I have driven you, says Yahuah, and I will bring you to the place from which I caused you to be carried away captive. Jeremiah chapter 29, verses 1 through 14. And he fulfilled that promise to them that believed. This was specifically to Judah, not to the whole house of Israel. So do not get it confused with the other prophecies. But please know, he has thoughts of peace and not of evil, to give a future and a hope. And we saw this when Messiah came. But he has prophesied more. So as we went through this history, you should take this same letter that Jeremiah wrote to those captives in Babylon and apply it to yourself today. And wait for Yahuah to fulfill his promises. Remember and focus on his promises. Make them your hope. Make them what you live for. And when he decides to move and call his children to his kingdom, we all will be ready together and live in unity and in peace. It's a true everlasting kingdom built around his promises. So I plead with you, always remember them and live your life in anticipation of them. You must be ready and always be blessed. Hallelujah. Praise Yah. Okay, thanks again for watching. If this has blessed you, please don't forget to like this and share this video with others. If you have not done so already, please do not forget to subscribe to this channel. Yah willing, I do upload every Friday. Please don't forget to follow this ministry on Facebook and Instagram, as well as on my website, truthunedited.com. As always, I really would like to thank all those who support this ministry. You know who you are. Your contributions have been an extreme blessing, and I'm very thankful for you. Thank you for answering the call Yah has placed on your heart. Thank you for being a blessing. Okay, thanks again for watching, everyone. I love you all.